All right, welcome along to the RT Soccer Podcast. I'm Raf Diallo alongside Jim McMahon of RT Sport Online. And this week we're joined by Gary Rogers and Conan Byrne. Plenty to talk about between the Women's European Championships, which has come to an end, and England have won. I'm not going to say the three words that I think are expected of me, which I think got out of the system before we hit record. We're also going to be talking about the Irish clubs in Europe, because three are remaining now. Shamrock Rovers in the Europa League after falling out of the Champions League, and then of course Sligo Rovers, great week for them last week, except in the FAI Cup, and then St. Pat's also making their way through, and then also we'll be previewing the Premier League season. So lads, welcome one and all. And Jim, I know you were up in Sligo at the weekend, so I'm sure the mood was brilliant other than the cup game.
Yeah, it was all going well until about whatever time, coming up to 9 p.m. last night when that shock came. It was unexpected. But yeah, I mean, as people were saying, like the showgrounds, and I think, Gary, you might have been in the showgrounds last Thursday, the place was hopping. I don't think the place has hopped as much for many, many years. And certainly, as Harold Macmillan said about a week being a long time in politics, I think 2 weeks has been a long time for Sligo Rovers after the abject display against Bala. Then to come back and show the determination that they showed to get past Motherwell in the cup, and likewise with St. Pat's, for them to dig in against Mura. And I think, even though it was on penalties, but I think by and large they deservedly went through to the next round. So it was great week for the minnows of Irish football, as they've been dubbed elsewhere. So yeah. Plenty of scarves and flags around statues in Sligo town, but somewhat disappointing, and likewise for Pats, that both clubs went out of the FAI Cup, because it is an avenue back into Europe. I mean, you win the FAI Cup, whether you finish last in the First Division or the Premier Division, that guarantees you a place in the Conference League. And I think for Sligo, because last year they went out at the same stage to Cork, and who were First Division Cork as well. So mainly the good, but with a little bit of a disappointment for both Pats and Sligo after the great Thursday that they had.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that very shortly. But first, we are going to talk about the Women's European Championship final. England beating Germany 2-1 after extra time. And Germany sort of hamstrung straight from the beginning. Alexandra Popp, their sort of leading light during the tournament, getting ruled out due to injury just before kickoff. And then there was a potential handball for Leah Williamson in the first half, which maybe if Germany had taken the lead, as some predictions had said, maybe they would have been able to hold on. But then Ella Toone with a well-taken goal, Ciara Walsh with a great pass, and then Lena McGull equalising for Germany before, these type of finals and the tense games you get. I think the scrappy goal by Chloe Kelly at the end kind of sums up what a cup final can be like. So England winning their first major tournament in quite some time in either the men's or the women's game. So let's just listen to reaction from Lisa Fallon and Karen Duggan and just how they viewed the final on RT television.
They've waited such a long, long time for it to come home, and they've finally brought it home. And that 1966 victory has sat like a black and white photograph in English football for so long of what victory looked like, and they finally brought it to life in full colour. And I'm so happy for so many of those players, because I know what it means. I know what so many of those players have gone through to get to that point today. They've shown so much resilience, they showed physicality, they showed cynicism today, there was creativity. They just showed everything required by a great team to win a tournament against a great team, and they delivered that today. And I think it's momentous for not just football in England or for women's football in England. It's going to be a big knock-on effect here, and I think it shows that the investment that was put in the game in England has transferred into success, real life success. And I'm genuinely really happy for them. I really am.
And I think a lot of that, Karen, is down to what they've been through. You look at the likes of the Ellen Whites, the Lucy Bronze, the Jill Scotts on the field. They've lost multiple semi-finals, to get to a final, to finally deliver. For those group of players, is you can see these scenes.
Yeah, they're the ones with the tears in their eyes. They've been through the hurts, so they know what that feels like, and they've been able to bring that passion into a squad of really exciting young players as well. Even Leah Williamson, she's very young, she's led by example, and they deserve these scenes, I don't think I've ever seen something as written in the stars. I think as soon as that penalty wasn't given and Pop was out, it was always meant to be England's day. And looking at these scenes, you're happy to see it because, like you say, it is so close to home and it could have such a positive impact over here, we hope as well.
Okay, so that was Karen Duggan, and before that, Lisa Fallon. Now, we're going to talk about that sort of knock-on effect from an Irish perspective of something Louise Quinn was speaking about on Saturday Sport on RTE over the weekend. But Conan, I know you were keeping an eye on this final, and it was sort of typical of a major tournament final in that, in terms of the quality, it was nowhere near as good as some of the games earlier in the tournament, but in terms of tension, it sort of made it exciting, and it was two really good teams sort of slugging it out.
Absolutely, yeah. I sat down with my two daughters, and something that they look up to hugely throughout the tournament has been able to see role models on the football pitch. And I think on the balance of play over the course of the 120 minutes, I think England deserved to win. You talked about Ella Toon's magical finish. It was a brilliant goal, brilliant dink over the goalkeeper. But I think Serena Weigman deserves all the credit for the impact the substitutions made in the game. You're taking off ultimately the player of the tournament, who scored all your goals, who scored most of your goals and created most of your chances as well, for Ella Toon. And even that is a brave move in itself, considering the amount of goals and how well she's done in the tournament. And bringing on Ella Toon, and 6 minutes later she pulls off a goal like that, which was absolutely remarkable. But the camaraderie within the group as well, Raf, was evident in when they lifted the trophy. Obviously, Leah Williamson lifting the trophy, and then straight away she hands it to the senior players that were standing behind her. It's just even that as a captain and showing that leadership and togetherness within the group is so vital. And as I was talking about Serena there, her record since she's gone in as England boss has been remarkable. Like 20 games, 18 wins, 2 draws. Scored 105 goals. So we talked, I think it was Elisa there or Karen who talked about Pop and the penalty incident being written in the stars for England. But I think you have to look at it on the whole tournament. And I think on the balance of play and over the course of all the games, I think they're fully deserving winners.
Yeah, I think there was the game against Spain where they were sort of on the ropes, so to speak. Spain sort of outplaying them and dominating possession, but they still found a way through. And then, as we saw against Germany played quite well despite some of the disadvantages they had to put up with, like losing their best player prior to kick-off. But as you said, Serena Wiegman, one of the best managers in the game, had won the European Championship with the Netherlands in 2017, and then to follow it up, and in between times taking the Dutch to the World Cup final too. So obviously she's going to be carrying England to the next World Cup, and they're going to be a serious prospect there as well. But on the final point that Karen Duggan made there in terms of the knock-on effect for the women's game here in Ireland, Jim, it's something that Louise Quinn was talking about on Saturday Sport, as I said, and I think we've already started to see it. She made the point about Tala being sold out for this Finland game on September 1st, and obviously, given the crucial nature of those games, getting a massive crowd in is important, but it sold out within hours. That tells you where the interest levels lie at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure maybe if the game had gone on, even though I don't think it ever would have gone on in the Aviva Stadium, I'm sure the Aviva Stadium could have been, not sure whether it would have been packed, but it could be very well close to being packed. And I think the fact as well, Raf, that the World Cup itself is only just 1 year away. It's in August of next year. And we're right, if we can get to a playoff, we could be fancying ourselves maybe to make that and finals, you know what I mean? So I definitely think, people the names of Irish players, people now, Vera Pauw, for example, her name is coming into the mainstream, that people know exactly who she is. If you look at the League of Art, if you look at the Women's League, the Women's National League, coverage on TG Cahir, getting that type of exposure as well. If you look at the strength of the Women's League over in England, for example, it's probably goes without saying that is the best league in Europe, maybe the best league in the world at the moment. So definitely, I think that the women's football as a global sport is one sport that has the capacity to really grow more and more as the years goes on. And, and I think for us here in Ireland, if we could maybe make a major tournament, whether it's going to be the World Cup or the next Euros, which is only going to be in 3 years, I think the growth of the game in this country will really expand as well.
Yeah, and a last word on England, Jim. You were reeling off a few stats before we hit record in terms of like where this fits into their history. Obviously, as we know, 1966 always looms large for them.
Yeah, 1966. Yeah, it was funny because on the same weekend in 1966, the English men won the World Cup. They won it on the 30th of July, 1966. And they beat the Germans, and that game too went to extra time, just like yesterday. So perhaps it was written in the stars that England would get over the line and bring it home, even though they've never won the tournament before. So I'm just wondering how they could bring it home, but it's home in some sort of a way now. But anyways, I don't think we'll get too fussy about that.
Yeah, bring it home. That's a different spin on.
Or sorry, not bring it
phrase.
home.
No, don't say
bring
it.
No, okay, sorry. Bring it home.
It's been said enough. But anyway, more importantly, at home here, there has been 3 clubs who have advanced in Europe. Shamrock Rovers in a very different way, obviously dropping out of the Champions League, going into the Europa League, which we'll talk about them very shortly. But I think the story of the week really was Sligo Rovers. They'd gone away the previous week and won 1-0 at Motherwell, and then the challenge was how were they going to. Obviously, Motherwell had seen the Sligo threat now, and how were they going to respond to that? But instead, Sligo beat them 2-0, 3-0, winning 3-0 on aggregate, and then booking a place against Viking Stavanger in the 3rd qualifying round of the Europa Conference League. Great achievement for them. And also a guaranteed 550,000 of prize money as well, which is another little bonus as well. But Gary, I know you were up there for the second leg as well as the first one. So how did they? We were talking to Graham Gartland last week in terms of how they should manage this second leg, and a lot of it was about the need to mix up their game. It shouldn't just be progress. It shouldn't be just be progressive. They have to be able to fight as well at the same time in another way. So how did they do it, and what was it sort of built on?
Yeah, well, look, the most important thing is that you don't cough up possession in European ties and say, listen, we've got 1-0 lead here and we sit and protect it. I think you've got to take it in the game in blocks. Obviously, Sligo started the game really well and were comfortable and composed. I think, a lot of things feed into the result. It's perfect timing. Like Motherwell are just coming into the season as well. Not that Sligo didn't deserve it. Sligo were absolutely the best side over the 2 legs, both home and away. Motherwell were probably slightly better in the home game, but certainly in the showgrounds, Sligo were full value for the win. Managed the game really well. Shane Blaney obviously sticks a free kick in the top corner. I think it's a brilliant strike. You look at the distance it's out. I think he probably caught the keeper by surprise. I think the keeper would be disappointed with that, but take nothing away from the finish. It was a magnificent free kick. But Sligo didn't panic. They were very composed. I think Luke McNicholas in the goals didn't really have a really busy game. He had a really good, solid game without making, say, an eye-catching save, whereas he was excellent in the first game, obviously after Ed McGinty leaving. It was a big step up for him, but came in, did really well. But overall, Aidan Keane, the goal that he put in for Max Mattis for the second goal was fantastic. In the game, he was brilliant. Fitzgerald on the wing. You look at the players they had with pace in wide areas, and they were really able to, to hurt Motherwell. I think Motherwell at the back were a little bit iffy and struggled to deal with Sligo. And Sligo's threat throughout the game was a constant problem for Motherwell, and I think that's what ultimately, they were able to capitalise on and get the win. So it's Sligo and John Russell and his team deserve great credit for obviously the job they've done, the homework they did, and the way they went about managing the game, and the players then to go and put that game plan into effect. Like Dave Cawley and McDonald in the midfield worked tirelessly as well. And when it comes to European football, you can't have passengers, and there was certainly no passengers over the 2 legs. I think every man can be really proud of the performance that they put in and the work that they put in. And Dave Cawley coming off the pitch, patting the guys in the back and sending them out to finish the job, it was brilliant.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane Blaney there, obviously that stunning free kick. So let's just listen to him. He was chatting to Adrian Eames after the game.
Shane, first of all, was that the greatest goal you've ever scored, the one tonight?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's probably one of the only goals I've ever scored, to be fair. But no, it's obviously a great goal. They can delighted with it.
And who entrusts you with the responsibility? Because I know that against Ballatown you had a crack from a similar range, but tonight you went for it again and you beat... he's part of the Scottish setup, Liam Kelly in the Motherwell goal.
Look, I've always been I'm confident over free kicks. I've hit them all my life throughout every team I've been at, really. just the distance that was out kind of set up perfectly for me, because I like them a wee bit further out, that I can get a good strike on it. And I think I caught him in the corner of my eye just the last second. He kind of shifted over. He thought I might pull it to the near post, so it played into my hands perfectly, so I just whipped it back over him.
And it was a great start, because obviously there was a certain amount of tension, a full house here at the Showgrounds. Yeah. But after 4 minutes to go in front, make it 2-0 in aggregate, that was the ideal start, wasn't it?
Yeah, calm things down a wee bit, all right. But look, we still had a massive task ahead of us, because we know the quality they have, and they could have easily slipped a couple through and went up another few notches. But we defended really well, like from the front, defended really, really well throughout both legs, and it's brilliant to get through.
Well, that was the thing, because despite the fact that they had so much possession, they very rarely opened you up, and Luke didn't really have a whole lot to do in goal.
Yeah. Other than maybe a couple of long strikes from them, Luke didn't have a load to do. But that's what I was saying there. Like, even though they had a lot of possession and stuff around the middle and stuff like that, there, I never really felt massively under pressure or that there. So it was just kind of keeping concentration throughout the 90 and making sure we're fully switched on, because obviously they do have clever players that can cut you open with one pass, and they've a great striker who's had a great career. So it was just about being switched on for the full 90, and thankfully we done it over both legs.
Great crowd here tonight. Did you have family here yourself?
Unbelievable crowd. Yeah, my brother's down, so no, it's class night.
So that is Shane Blaney of Sligo Rovers. Obviously, you can hear a bit of the atmosphere post game, as he was talking there to Adrian Eames. Now, Conan, obviously the next step for them is to play Viking of Norway, and that's again, as you step up in the competition, obviously it gets tougher and tougher. Now they've lost. Obviously they beat Sparta Prague in their, and I think that would be kind of a stunning result even for themselves, because we know Sparta Prague are one of those type of clubs that are, at least in a bygone era, were regulars in the Champions League and Europa League, but they have lost their top scorer Veteran Berisha, I saw, who's gone to Hammarby in the last week or so. So obviously they've suffered a bit of a blow. What chances do you give Sligo against Viking? We don't get to see the likes of Viking every week, but it'll be intriguing to see how they get on.
Yeah, I think if a Sligo Rovers fan is looking at the Norwegian League and sees them sitting fifth, they might get their hopes up a little bit more than they should. They're 3 points off Bodo Glimt, who obviously destroyed Linfield last week, 8-0, albeit Kirk Miller being sent off after 20 minutes or so. And do I think Linfield would beat Sligo Rovers? Probably. So that just goes to show the quality that the Norwegian League has. And Viking are a very, very good side. As you said there, Berisha's been sold to Hammarby in Sweden. He scored 8 goals and 4 assists already this season. So that's a plus for Sligo Rovers. But they have Zlatko Tripic, very good creative midfielder, can score goals, and he's probably the one to look out for more than most. So yeah, it's a complete step up from Motherwell. But as Gary will probably say, when you have a packed showgrounds, and it's the old cliche of the 12th man, they certainly act like that. So it's very, very important that the Sligo Rovers fans get behind the team, both home and away. And European form, domestic form goes out the window when you play in Europe. And as we can see over the weekend there, it's very evident of that. Players raise their game 10, 15, 20% when it comes to these European games. And you just have to go out and be compact and make sure that you don't concede early. I think that would be vital over the course of the 2 games. And after the first game, to make sure that you have some sort of result to come back to. We saw Shamrock Rovers obviously conceding that late goal against Ludogorets to make it 3-0 over in Bulgaria. And then the kind of disappointment then when they went 2-0 up, to think that they're going to have to get another goal. And obviously they were hitting this on the counter-attack then. But yeah, I think it's they're certainly up against it. So are Pats, if I'm being completely honest as well. So yeah, it's just great to get through and get that financial reward of winning the second qualifying round.
Yeah, and in the meantime, they've signed Robbie Burton on loan from Dinamo Zagreb, so obviously to add to the squad. But a final word on Sligo, Jim, obviously, as someone from that area and who's had a taste of the atmosphere, obviously, over the last few days. It's obviously, regardless of how far they've gone, the way they beat Motherwell, I mean, it's a momentous period, a momentous moment, I suppose, in the club's history, and also for the town on a sporting point of view.
Yeah, it is, because that well-worn cliche about Sligo being a great football town, being a great soccer town, which it is, and it always has been. I think, Sligo, I don't think this is the first time that they've gone to the second round or past the second round stage of a competition in Europe. So from that point of view, it has been brilliant. Also, as well, the tickets for the second leg on Thursday week have sold out in quick time. So Sligo will have a full house. But as Conan said, it's all about bringing something back to the showgrounds, like even if they're a goal behind, you know what I mean? As long as they're in the tie, I think if they were to suffer maybe a 3-0 defeat like what Ludogorets beat Shamrock Rovers, last Tuesday week, that would make it more and more difficult. But I was just thinking though, like as good and all as what Sligo and what Pats have done in the last week, we're basically at the same stage as we were last year in Europe, because this week last year we had Shamrock Rovers in Europe, still in Europe. We had Dundalk still in Europe and Bohemian still in Europe. So it would be brilliant if either one of Pats or Sligo could go that step further. But as Conan said, it will be difficult for both. From Sligo Rovers' point of view, I don't think we expected them to get past Motherwell, because even though Motherwell are only starting their season, purely based on that, as I said, abject showing, that second leg showing against Bala. But having been in the town over the weekend, you can certainly see great buzz about the place. And also as well, and Gary I thought the showgrounds looked impeccable there on Thursday night. The pitch, finally, the pitch was looking good. The weather was good. And it was just one of those great nights in the showgrounds that it probably hasn't been hopping as much for a long time. And hopefully come Thursday week, if they're still in the tie, that they can give their fans something else to shout about.
Yeah, whereas Pats also made their way through, as you said, and they're going to be playing CSKA Sofia of Bulgaria in the next round. They beat Mura on penalties after drawn with both legs, 0-0 in the second leg. Gary, we'll talk about Joseph Anang very, very shortly, just in terms of his performance, because obviously he was a key to them making their way through. But obviously, Conan, I know you were on commentary with Oisín Langan for that Mura second leg, and in terms of how they managed the game, because as we talked about the first game previously, and 1-1 at home, and probably on the balance of play, Pats should have been going to Slovenia with an advantage. But again, it's these European away games are very difficult tactically, and it seems like Pats dealt with the challenges of that very, very well.
Yeah, look, they were absolutely superb. Now, if I'm being completely honest, I don't think Mura were up to too much. I don't think they're the force of last year. They lost obviously a couple of players, considering they went on that fabulous cup run themselves in the Europa Conference League, defeating Tottenham along the way. But having said that, take nothing away from the performance and the attitude and determination of every single Pats player, both that started and that came off the bench as well. I think Tim Clancy would probably like a better impact off the bench, if I'm being completely honest, just in the sense that take the final pass. There was plenty of times that St. Pat's could have won the game in normal time if they took the right ball in the final third. And it was like a lot of players were thinking that their names were going to go into lights, and they were just taking the wrong option when it was easier to pass to one of their teammates for a simple tap in, or different scenarios like that. But yes, I know Gary will talk about Joseph Anang now, but he made 3 or 4 absolutely world-class saves. I think the back three of Harry Brockbank, Joe Redmond and Gravozzi were superb. Jamie Lennon as well, he broke his foot back in March. He came back in for his first start since then and played 60 minutes. Did excellent. Toyce Timmermans come on his place and didn't put a foot wrong either. Chris Forrester did what he does, and Owen Doyle leading the line very, very well. So I think over the course of the 2 legs, St. Pat's fully deserved to win. Now, they're going in to play CSKA Sofia now shortly in this week, obviously, and the step up between the two sides is vast. I've watched a couple of the highlights of CSKA Sofia over the last number of days, and just the speed of their play, the technique of their players is something to behold, really, at this level. And St. Pat's will be completely up against it. But as you say never to bring it back to Richmond Park, similar to the showgrounds, with some sort of positive result. And look, you never know.
Yeah, and CSKA Sofia do have quite a bit of an Irish connection as well from the past. Obviously, I was talking to Killian Sheridan a couple of years ago about his adventures in Bulgaria. Obviously, he's had adventures in a lot of other countries, but Bulgaria was sort of the first stop after he moved away from Scotland. And then also there's Graham Carey, who was there for a couple of years, and I think has just left to go to St. Johnston as well. So that's kind of a pity that he's kind of gone just before this kind of tie comes along. And then I think he scored their first goal against Roma or something last season in the Conference League. So there's some unexpected connections there, but I think the Killian Sheridan one was quite well known. We leave the link to that interview with him, the one I did a couple of years ago, just in the description box on YouTube below. But Gary Rogers, the Joseph Anang, his performance and obviously his role in the penalty shootout, but also within the game itself. I mean, he was a goalkeeper maybe that there were question marks when he first came in, but he seems to have answered quite a lot of them.
Yeah, look, I think there's probably unfair question marks on him because he came in his first game was against Shamrock Rovers in the President's Cup, and okay, he made a mistake for a goal, but watch him after that, and he was excellent in the next game. So there was question marks probably put on him very quickly for no real reason, only that we really didn't know a whole lot about him. But I think he's been terrific for St. Pat's this year. And look, with any European tie, your goalkeeper is going to always have to play well. And he can certainly put his hand up and say that he played his part. And as Conan said, he made some terrific saves in the game, obviously contributed in the penalty shootout as well. And it's great for him to, obviously, that'd be great for his confidence as a young keeper to go into a European game, really play well at the highest level, and to win a penalty shootout as well can only stand to him. And that's, great for him as a keeper going forward. He's come on loan from West Ham, and he'll bring that experience back. That's experience that you're not going to get in under 21 or under 23s football in the UK. So it's brilliant for him. And like Conan said, CSKA Sofia is going to be a huge test. Obviously, we've seen Ludogorets against Shamrock Rovers, and the style of their play and the speed that they play at. I think Ludogorets in Tala, they really were poor in the first half, and Shamrock Rovers probably could have got a couple of more goals. But over there, they were exceptional. They moved the ball really, really quickly, and a lot of their players, you could see the pace of their movement, but also the speed of their passes. And they were within in their home tie, they were excellent. So you'd be expecting a similar sort of quality from Sofia in this tie. And like Conan says, it's going to be a tough ask, but I wouldn't underestimate what St. Pat's did against Mura. Obviously, a team that was in the Conference League last year, wouldn't be a well-known team to people in Ireland, but for St. Pat's, if you compare budgets and all the rest and where they were, like it's a big win for a League of Ireland team. And because they're not a household name, I think sometimes we can underestimate the magnitude of the achievements as well.
Yeah, and all of it is also important, not just in terms of prize money, but in terms of UEFA coefficients for the league, and then obviously for the clubs themselves. And Shamrock Rovers have a good opportunity to help build on that. Obviously, they had lost their first leg in Ludogorets 3-0, but then salvaged a 2-1 home win. So 4-2 on aggregate going out there. But now they drop into the Europa League third round, and it's Shkupi of North Macedonia and the home leg first. And Shkupi, again, not a team we'd know too much about. They only won their first Macedonian League title last season, and they were fairly unlucky to just lose 3-2 to Dinamo Zagreb, who would be a household name in terms of Champions Leagues and Europa League group stages or qualifying rounds. And they've sort of risen up the Macedonian League quite quickly since getting promoted 7 years ago. Now they've been playing in Europe for the last for every season since 2018-19. So it's a tricky enough challenge for Shamrock Rovers, but also Conan, they do know that there is the fallback option of the Europa Conference League. I mean, getting to landing in the third qualifying round of the Europa League obviously puts them into the playoff round by default of the Conference League. So there's a lot of opportunities lying in wait for them here.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for Shamrock Rovers. And I think out of the three sides, this is the one that we have a realistic aim of getting into the next round with. As you said, Shkupi they've no league games played this season. So that's a huge advantage for us. Their season doesn't start till next weekend. So it's a huge advantage for Shamrock Rovers then with the experience that they've had this season, with the game time that they've had to get through this tie. Obviously they defeated Lincoln Red Imps in the first qualifying round of the Champions League 3-2. They won 3-0 at home. They lost 2-0 away. And like you said, they're defeated by Dynamo Zagreb, which is again a household name and one that result can't be taken lightly. They seem to be very experienced defensively, Raf, and with Shamrock Rovers kind of short of pace up front, that's the area that I think that Shamrock Rovers needed to improve on. They have Gaffney, obviously, and who runs the line very, very well, and it does have pace, but it's just those wide areas that you'd like to have players running in behind and getting balls across the box. And with the fact that that Shkupi have an experienced back line, that's the area that I think Shamrock Rovers really need to get behind. But yeah, it's going to be a fascinating tie. As I said, it's the realistic one for me for an Irish team to get through, and let's hope it bodes well.
Yeah, and in terms of strengthening, in terms of helping with pace and other things, also strengthening defensively. Obviously, Pico Lopez picking up an injury that's due to keep him out for about 8 weeks, give or take. But Gary, Simon Power coming in from Harrogate Town, obviously for people on this side of the Irish Sea, obviously he would have started out at Cabinteely and then played at UCD before going across to Norwich, and then someone you know fairly well, Daniel Cleary, obviously coming back to the League of Ireland from St Johnstone.
Yeah, look, it's obviously really good timing for them with Pico picking up that injury, and he's been so important to them over the last number of years. But like Daniel Cleary, to say, is a guy I know really well, and he's a top class player. Has massive experience for a man so young. He would have played Europa League group stages. So these players coming in, obviously it has to come in and hit the ground running. Dan obviously played at the weekend, so did Simon. So they've got a bit of time with the squad, and it'd be just interesting to see will they stay, who will start possibly in the Champions League game during the week. So, but like I think the signings they brought in are excellent, and will only add to the squad. Obviously, look at the pity that Pico is out, because he's been excellent for them, and his experience and being away playing international football, and he's really grown into a leader at the back for Shamrock Rovers. But look, there's great experience there. You've got like Sean Gannon, Ronan Finn, Sean Hoare, all these guys really experienced European footballers at this stage, and all have a number of games. So it's about being able to manage the game, and I think they will see this as a really good opportunity, to progress. Like that the fact that they're not in season, that hurts you. Like it would have hurt Motherwell last week as well, and it's one of the reasons why our teams have been so good in Europe over the years. Like I would have always said it with Dundalk, we would have been hoping to get Celtic at this stage, because you're always going to have to beat a top team to progress and get to group stages. And although Celtic wouldn't have seen us as much opposition, but you would have always fancied yourself against a higher quality team when they're out of season, because we're in full flow and they're coming off the back of playing against good European teams. Like Shamrock Rovers, although they've got beaten in the last couple of games, but they've played against probably higher opposition than they're going to play against week in, week out in the league, and that will help them. So like if they can obviously build on the performances that they've had, although they've been defeats ultimately in the round, but if they can bring that into this week's tie, I think they'll really fancy themselves progressing. But it's about game management. I think Shamrock Rovers last year suffered from a late goal. They suffered from a late goal and new regret over there. Like if they come home with a 2-0 defeat as opposed to a 3-0, the tie is a completely different thing. So you can't drop your concentration for a minute in European football, because that little lapse or it will cost you, because the thing about it is that teams are so clinical, and for Irish teams to progress, you obviously have to be really tight at the back. But you're always going to get opportunities, but you've got to be clinical. You've got to take them, and taking the opportunities is what builds and gives you the chance of progression in European games.
Yeah, and we are in full flow, because obviously the FAI Cup got underway in terms of the big hitters entering the competition, and there weren't too many shocks until sort of later in the weekend. Obviously Pats losing to Waterford, and then Sligo losing to Wexford, and sort of coincidentally both teams that have been involved in Europe, maybe with the distraction of that played some part in it. But I suppose first on Sligo, Gary, what went wrong there against Wexford?
Yeah, look, I think it's difficult. Like it would have happened myself and probably Conan before in European games, where you've had that high of being the underdog and slaying a giant, if you like, during the week, and then you're coming along and you're playing a lesser game at the weekend, and it happens. Like it would have happened myself when we played at Sligo. We got beat by UCD in between beating Rosenborg, and the same with I think with Dundalk, we beat Bate Borisov on the Thursday and went down to Galway on the Sunday and got beaten. So it does happen, and it highlights maybe the squads more so than the actual team, because I think you're making changes. Squad's a little bit lighter. You have the high of the game during the week, And then, if you're a little bit off, teams sense it. And Wexford would have been coming there preparing all week. They would have loved to see Sligo go through. And they'd be saying to themselves, well, we've got a real chance here because they'll possibly make a few changes. And, they'll still be on a high from the other night. And in fairness to Ian Ryan and Wexford, look, they're not, the Wexford of old where you look at them as a soft touch. They certainly are not that. And Ian's very professional in his approach. He's like a very, very good coach. He would have worked at UCD, but he would have put in place a game plan. And look, they got the rub of the green with the goal in extra time. But they put in a really good performance away from home against Sligo, and they'll be really happy. Although, like, it would have been a terrific week for Sligo if they had it progressed, because the women's team obviously beat Shelbourne 3-2 as well, and they were having a terrific week. And you think about it, Sligo Rovers women's team, their first year as a senior team, and they go and beat the champions in their home ground live on TV, and obviously off the back of Sligo winning at Motherwell. So it just put a little bit of a taint on the week for Sligo Rovers, but all in all, I think they'll be pretty happy with how their week has been.
Yeah, and Wexford have been going well. Conan, I think I saw you tweeting about Ian Ryan and just how in demand he will be. I mean, we were talking to Ollie Cal about this earlier in the season, because he was very impressed with the way they ended last season, and then the way they've navigated the first division this season, where they're not that far off the playoff places, just within touching distance, and have been pretty solid throughout. So Ryan certainly, I think, and Gary alluded to it there, like a really, really good coach.
Yeah, it was basically an instant impact. Like last April going into May, they had 3 consecutive defeats of 3-0 away to Athlone, 6-0 at home to UCD, and 5-0 away to Cork. And then within a month, Ian Ryan took over and managed to get them not up the tables, but points on the board when they didn't have them. Obviously, then he went into pre-season, had his own stamp on things. And we've got to remember that Ian is obviously with UCD. He was manager of the Leinster schools team as well. So he has a good idea and a good range of players, of availability and people that want to come and play for him. So he's a good knowledge of young players around Ireland. And he was managed to handpick some of those, bring them down. He brought in some good experienced players, the likes of Dinny Corcoran, Conor Davis, Aaron Dobbs, that have Premier Division experience as well. Conor Crowley in midfield has been very, very good. But the young players, the likes of Harry Groom, who plays centre of the park, very technical, really good player, talking to some opposition players that have played against Wexford, they've been very, very impressed with him. So I think he's done a fantastic job for Wexford. And the fact that they're just so close to getting that playoff position now. The defeat to Sligo, as Gary said, the game plan was put in place. I'd say he was on the Wexford camper only delighted that Sligo got through, thinking that they may have taken their eye off the ball, which possibly they did. But with Sligo going into extra time, again, another bad reason for them going into this game, 120 minutes, like Max Mata having 120 minutes now going into Thursday's game. But with going back to Ian Ryan and Wexford, he is a manager in demand. Obviously, Waterford had already looked at him. I think that came out in media circles a couple of months back. But if he continues to do what he's doing, he's very popular among his, when he was doing his pro license, the people that were working around him at that time were very impressed with his work and with his knowledge of the game and how he looks at things. He's brought in Lorcan Fitzgerald as well, another serial winner. So it's all bodes well for Wexford, but it's very important that they hold on to him as long as they can, because I do see people coming in for him for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, as I said,
also, Raf,
yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, at the heart of the Wexford defence last night, Joe Manley, he seemed to be blocking and heading and kicking everything away, and I think he picked up a bad injury near the end, but if he had went off, Wexford would have been down to 10 men because they had used up all their subs at that point. But so he stayed on the pitch as a kind of a presence there on the edge of the box as the last few minutes ticked away. So I think he, don't know whether he got man of the match, but he certainly was a towering influence last night for Wexford.
Yeah, and Waterford, as you said, Conan, had looked at Ian Ryan, but their form, their form and has they were in really good form, and then they've had a little drop off. But then obviously beating Pats in the Cup is a sort of a welcome boost for them. So what happened here for Pats?
I think just the European hangover again. Like again, I put up similar tweet yesterday, just going through the games over the last number of weeks where clubs have played in Europe and then gone back to the domestic matters and they haven't picked up results. Obviously, Sligo, after being beaten by Ballatown, UCD went down to the showgrounds and beat them 2-0. Shamrock Rovers drew at home to Drogheda after the Ludogorets game, and Pats then today, or yesterday, should I say, where they were beaten at home 3-2. And yeah, you could talk about the changes of play, because they changed formation back to their usual shape yesterday against Waterford. They had gone 3 with a box in midfield in Europe against NS Mura, but they went back to their 4-3-3 formation yesterday. And what kind of bugs me more than most is that these players that haven't got game time are given the opportunity in these games to put themselves in not even for the club to participate in Europe the following week in games, but put themselves in the shop window. And some of them just don't grasp the opportunity at all. Like I was watching a game on Friday, Shells against Bray, and there was a player that came off the bench. I don't want to name him, but he came off the bench, hadn't been playing in months. And he goes through and he tries to just a little clever chip over the keeper, where I know if I was a manager in the touchline, I was like, I don't know if I could trust you bringing on to a game at 1-1, and then that situation happens again, and you're not going to try that same technique. So I think players, and as Gary alluded to earlier on about the squad, I think the squad needs to do better in games in the FAI Cup. So I'm not going to throw it all to the players in the St. Pat's or the Sligo dressing room, but I do feel that when you're given the opportunity to go out and put your name out there to say, yes, I'm ready for this European experience, or I want somebody to sign me, they don't take it anymore. And Waterford took full advantage, take nothing away from the performance. I thought the front three were absolutely superb. Awatria with another 2 goals for him coming in from Charlton, Katerna as well. They're doing great work with Charlton's academy, bringing in those 2 players. They've been absolutely sensational. Phoenix Patterson as well has been superb. But yeah, it's I think Waterford fully deserved the victory. St. Pat's second half was toothless. They were really, really poor. They didn't have they had a lot of the ball, but they just didn't create as many chances as Tim Clancy would like. And ultimately, he'd be very disappointed, because it's a momentum killer for both sides. When you look at it, given the success and within the fans as well, like St. Pat's, they love a good cup run. They love the FAI Cup. When we won the league in 2013 at St. Pat's, it was like, yeah, that's grand, but we prefer the FAI Cup. And the fact that they're holders as well, and they go out with a whimper yesterday, it's disappointing. So they need to pick themselves back up now, heading to Bulgaria on Thursday.
Yeah, and Derry City will be looking at the cup with, they'll be looking at it as a potential opportunity for them. Now, they started very, very well, beating Oliver Bond Celtic 7-0. Michael Duffy, obviously continuing his return. I think he'd returned against Riga in the second leg and featured against them as well. And then Declan Glass, a relative newcomer as well, among the goals. And they have also loaned out Maddie Smith to Shelbourne as well. So we might just talk about transfers here, because there's a little bit of movement in terms of loans and different things happening. So Gary, just from a Dundalk point of view, then Robbie McCourt arriving in from Sligo, sort of fill in at left back, and then they've also brought in Runar Hauge from on loan from Hibs, so he's a Norwegian winger. And then also at the back, Mark Connolly not staying is another blow for them, because their defensive record's been pretty good. Like a lot of moving parts here, but from a Dundalk point of view first, in terms of the movement.
Yeah, look, I think Dundalk, obviously, with Mark Connolly leaving, who has been excellent for them, Robbie McCourt coming in. I'm actually surprised that Robbie McCourt's coming in, but it's nearly tribute to how well Paddy Kirk has done at Sligo Rovers, because Robbie McCourt was excellent for Sligo Rovers last year. So he comes in, he can play left side centre back, or he can play left back as well. Like Connolly going is a big loss, and looks like he's Derry City have taken advantage there. Another Dundalk player to Derry, even though he was only on loan. But I think both Derry and Dundalk will look at this cup now as a really good opportunity, because I think both of them will say they're probably not strong enough to put a title challenge together, possibly, even though they will be probably closest contenders. But I can't see either of them beating Shamrock Rovers to the league title. And an FAI Cup would be an opportunity that they would say we can certainly do something here. And the Dundalk and both teams have beaten Shamrock Rovers this year on one-off games. So Greg Sloggett had a great game for Dundalk. Obviously a 4-0 win against Longford. Longford were really solid and stuck in there, and it was 0-0 at half time, but once they broke the deadlock, the floodgates opened up, and Dundalk capitalised. It's just a strange one. It wasn't as big a crowd at that game as it had been in previous games, but cup games are about getting through, and both teams have done that. And like I said, there's guys coming into the squad will hopefully strengthen. I think the Dundalk one, it's a fine line whether it'll be strengthened or not, because I think Connolly had such a really good impact on that defence. He was a real leader at the back, a really good talker, so they would be disappointed to lose him. But like I said, Robbie McCourt has been excellent for Sligo, and I think Stevie will be happy with that signing as well.
Yeah, and Aaron Connolly going to Derry City, but James Clark going from Drogheda United on a multi-year deal to Bohemians, Conan. So he's a Bows fan by all accounts, and he also used to be a mascot. So that from what Keith Long was saying, but it's their 8th signing, so they've it sort of tells you maybe where they were at the start of the season, the amount of change that was needed there.
Yeah, and I think everybody noticed that, and we're talking about it, including in media circles and fans and everything. So I think it was only a matter of time, and I'm sure he couldn't wait for the transfer window to open to make these signings. Like John O'Sullivan coming in as well from League Two, which was a huge positive signing in terms of leadership, which they were lacking massively in the opening couple of months of the season. But you mentioned James Clark. He's a wonderful talent. Absolutely fantastic, and Drogheda have done well to hold on to him for so long, because he's going to be a fan's favourite. He seemed to be already after his performance on Friday against Finn Harps. But Keith Long loves signing players from Scotland as well, bringing in Declan McDade as well, and Josh Kerr both in the score sheet the other night, along with Ali Coote and Liam Burt, who hail from that region too. He's an eye for a player, Keith, and it's just very important that he tries to hold on to him now for as long as possible, because there's already people sniffing around Burt domestically and from abroad as well. But yeah, Keith seems to have done a good job in the transfer market. He's got picked up a very, very good result against Drogheda United last week in that 1-0 win. They kept a clean sheet. It's not often that Bows are able to do that. But leadership has been the most important, and with the signings of the likes of Josh Kerr, more importantly John O'Sullivan, they're hopefully going to kick on now for the remainder of the season.
Yeah, and the Bows women's team also had a good week, holding Shelbourne to a 0-0 draw last Wednesday. And then when it comes to the weekend, Bows beat Cork City 3-1. But elsewhere in the table, and we're going to see just how it tightens up, Athlone Town, who have been going really well this season, beating DLR Waves 2-1. Sligo Rovers then, as I think Jim and I think you all mentioned actually earlier on, pulled off a massive upset, beating the champions Shelbourne 3-2, which is really thrown the cat among the pigeons in terms of the title race now, and coupled with Peamount winning 2-1 against Galway, and they're just pulling themselves back into it, and also Wexford beating Treaty United 3-0. So what it does to the table, Shelbourne still leading, but they've played a game more than the chasing pack. They're 5 points clear of Wexford, who have now really put themselves into the mix. Athlone Town hovering dangerously as well. Peamount a little bit further off, but obviously it's a team with pedigree and a lot of great players in there. And I think, Jim, as you said, Sligo Rovers, this is their first year in the division, and 19 points, and the well clear Cork City and Treaty United below them.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of the year, Sligo came into the league. I think people were hoping that they would acquit themselves well, maybe, avoid, being down at the basement. And as you say, they're pretty well clear of the basement at the moment. Having flicked on Saturday, watching the TG Cahir coverage, I think they were 2-0 down after 20 minutes, but they certainly roared back into the game. Emma Doherty, there's a great Donegal connection there at the moment. She scored twice after that, and I thought the winning goal, classic long punt through and long ball in, and then a chip over the keeper. Just a pity as well. I think the crowd was small at it again. So like we were talking earlier about women's football, that's hopefully the attendance figures, are something that will increase as we go through the next couple of seasons as well. But it certainly does breathe life back into the top of the table as well. I think with the Athlone and Wexford, 5-6 points now behind Shelbourne, but they do have a game in hand. So with 8-9 games to go, hopefully we'll get a thrilling finish to the league.
Yeah, and also the notable subplot of that Sligo Rovers Shelbourne game, of course, was Heather O'Reilly, who World Cup winner and Olympic champion as well, many times with the United States. So one of the great players of recent times, but has been retired for 3 years. And then she rocks up at Shelbourne, sort of out of nowhere last week. Now she was talking to Marie Crowe just after making the decision. So let's just listen to her here. There's a nice little Arsene Wenger impression in there as well.
A few weeks ago, I played in a charity match called Soccer Aid in London, and Arsene Wenger was my manager, and he said, "Heather, you are still a very good player. You should play." I said, "Thanks, Arsene." I never played Champions League football. I always dreamed of it.
O'Reilly, who has 3 Olympic gold medals, made contact with Shelbourne and the move was arranged. Although she hasn't played for a team in a while, the former Arsenal star feels she still has something to offer.
It's no secret that I have been away from the game in a formal capacity for a number of years. I'm 37 years old. I just had 2 kids. So those are all the obvious things. Maybe not so obvious is that I do play quite a bit. These first couple weeks I'll be working with Noel to make sure that I'm gradually getting touches back on the ball.
Meanwhile, Shelbourne manager Noel King is delighted with his new signing and believes that the arrival of O'Reilly will offer a huge boost to the league as a whole.
This is another huge step forward for the club. It'll give it a little bit more profile and hopefully develop things from this in the future. Okay,
so that is Heather O'Reilly, obviously US legend, and then Noel King, their Shelbourne manager. But Jim, in terms of what that does for the league, obviously, she's been out of the game for 3 years, and then obviously Arsene Wenger, and she did I think bonus points for the second impression. Just throw in stuff like we played with the handbrake on, and I didn't see it, and I think that would be a more perfect sort of impression. But in the overall sense, on a serious point, in terms of her arrival and what it does for the league and the profile, it's obviously good to see some of the greats of the game coming over, because it does add a little bit more interest.
Oh, it does. And I think her aim is to play Champions League football, and she's going to get that chance in a couple of weeks' time. Hopefully she'll make some impact, because even if you go back to the men's league down through the years, back in the day when we've had the likes of Trevor Brooking coming over for a couple of games, or George Best playing. So hopefully, she's 37, but obviously, talent is there. And hopefully once she gets, I think she did come on late on up in the showgrounds at the weekend. So yeah, definitely. It does add to the luster of the league here, having somebody of her talent coming back, and it's just one of those good news stories as well for the women's league here. And yeah, I think she might just have to work a little bit more on the Arsene Wenger, get the kind of little bit more on that impression, but, good start.
Yeah, Stephanie Roach, Rafi, she's not the only one now with a Puskas nominee playing in the Women's National League.
All right. Oh, yes.
Yeah. But as she alluded to, the Champions League, they've got... So the way it works, it's a 4-team sort of group, but it's sort of semi-finals, and you get to a final. So Shells have got ZNK Pomorje of Slovenia on the 18th of August, and then hopefully from there they get into the decider then, and into the second kind of qualifying bracket of it. But then elsewhere in terms of transfers, there's Amber Barrett, who is staying in Germany but has signed for FFC Turbin Potsdam. She used to play for Cologne previously, and Niamh Farley also heading to Parma. So that's some of the transfer news on that front. But we're coming to near enough to the end, so we might just talk about the Premier League. We'll just squeeze that in at the very end. I mean, the Community Shield on Saturday kind of just reminded me again that season is coming very, very closely. I thought I might need another couple of weeks of a break from the Premier League, but Gary, in terms of the top end, obviously you can't read too much into a Community Shield game, even though it seems like a lot of people were writing off Erling Haaland just because he missed a bit of a sitter, but obviously he's going to go on probably and score 20-25 goals a season. But at the top end, do you really see anybody challenging the top two at this when the season kicks off?
Yeah, it's sad to say, but probably not. I think that the top 2 teams are so good. You're expecting Man United and Arsenal and Spurs and all these teams to start, and Chelsea putting better, I suppose, runs together. And the quality in the Premier League is it's frightening. And you think of the top 2 and the players that they have and the players that they've brought in, like the likes of Darwin and Haaland coming in. to already probably two of the best teams in the world. So, like, you know, it's hard to bridge that gap, and you certainly won't bridge it, I don't think, in one season. It'll take, you know, a couple of transfer windows and possibly a couple of seasons and then you're looking for one of them teams to drop off. But how they've behaved in the transfer window in terms of like Klopp and his signings and the value that he's been able to get, and the players that he's been able to bring in, but not only just bring them in, but make them better. Like, he's bringing in top class players and improving them. So it's for me, I still couldn't see outside. Like, I couldn't call which one of them will win it, because it's so tight and it's so finely balanced. But yeah, I think it'd be very hard to look outside Liverpool and Manchester City.
And Conan, when we look at the chasing pack, so Arsenal seem to have done some really good business in terms of Gabriel Jesus being the most high-profile one, but also Zinchenko, a very versatile player. Chelsea bring in Raheem Sterling, but then I think even possibly more importantly at the back, Koulibaly, you know, has been a star defender in Serie A for Napoli for a long time. And then, you know, Spurs with Antonio Conte, you know, seemingly the business they've done, not just Richarlison up front, but just sort of widening out the rest of the squad seems to be impressive. And then we come to Manchester United, who I don't know what to expect from them at all. I mean, they did bring in Lisandro Martinez, who Eric Ten Hag will know very well, but then at the other end of things, you're looking at Cristiano Ronaldo, and won't he stay, or what's the story there? And I don't know, do you look at them maybe as sort of the weakest of the chasing pack, just on paper? Obviously they could catch up in terms of the tactical side of the game, which is, I think, something that has been missing for them.
Yeah, I do. I think the other people around them, the likes of what you've mentioned there, Chelsea and Arsenal and Spurs, have all strengthened. I've been very impressed with Spurs' 6 summer signings. I think Spence is going to be really exciting. Whether he takes up Matt Doherty's position, though, is something that we'll have to watch very, very closely. But with Ten Hag at Manchester United, I think the drama of getting De Jong into the side before the season kicks off has kind of hampered his preparation. I think if they had got it over the line a number of weeks ago, it could have been focused on the league campaign going forward. Obviously, Martinez is a very good player, done really, really well at Ajax. But this scenario around Ronaldo as well is not going to help things, especially around the dressing room. So yeah, I do think they'll have a bit to find on the likes of Arsenal, Chelsea, and Spurs. I've been very impressed with Arsenal in pre-season, Raf, if I'm being completely honest. Odegaard now has gone in as captain. He's been excellent in the tail end of last season. But bringing in Jesus, who's firing on all cylinders in pre-season, scoring, I think he scored 2 the other day against Sevilla. Sakho's doing well. The combination between those two have been really impressive. And bringing in Zinchenko as well, because you have that Kieran Tierney situation, who is a fantastic left back, but is injury prone. Yeah. So you have Zinchenko that can play there at left back, but probably prefers playing in central midfield. And then you have Xhaka, who gets suspended half the season anyway. So they can mix and match the two players in those positions. So it's clever dealings by Arteta. But yeah, I think if I'm looking at, I think Arsenal will be the ones with most improvement. But as Gary says, there's still a lot to find between themselves and Liverpool and Man City.
Yeah, and then at the other end, Gary, obviously it'll be intriguing to watch Newcastle, who will probably push closer to that. They won't be in the top 6, I don't think, but they'll be pushing closer to it, obviously, with all the financial advantages that they've suddenly discovered over the last year or so. But you know, Everton is something that intrigues me down at the other end of the table. I was just reading a lot of the fan previews and that they have on The Guardian, and the vast majority have first to get sacked. It was just like Frank Lampard. You go through the entire league. Now, he did well to actually keep them up because they were in a bit of a mess after starting the season with Rafa Benitez. But like on my notes here, I have relegation fodder, which is basically the new clubs, Forest, Fulham and Bournemouth, plus Everton, and then you can probably throw in Leeds as well there. So how do you see that playing out? Because there's a lot of clubs that can get dragged back in there. Maybe Everton, especially losing Richarlison and haven't really strengthened. And then you've got the 3, it's always tough for the 3 clubs that come up, and we don't know what to expect from any of them.
Yeah, well, look, that's the thing. It's one of those things. You got clubs that come up, and of the 3 that come up, there's always one nearly that surprises you and that kicks on and has a really good season. But you're rightly so. You should be. I think if Frank Lampard uses any sort of motivation, he puts all the predictions in his office, and tried to prove people wrong, but like you would worry for Everton. Like they just stayed up last season by the skin of their teeth, and you know, if anything, they look to be weak and not strengthening. So, you know, and in the Premier League, you know, you can't afford to do that. You've always got to be adding to the group and keeping your best players, not losing them, and then adding quality around it. So you would be worried. I know my dad's a big Everton supporter, so I'm sure he'll be worried about it as well. But yeah, look, it's of them teams, I would say probably Everton will be in that mix. You look at Forest and they're making signings and bringing players in. So it's obviously we'll be keeping a keen eye on Bournemouth with Mark Travers playing in goals, and we're kind of lucky that we've Travers and Bazunu probably playing. Will look like they will start the season as first choice goalkeepers for Premier League clubs, and Keegan Keller obviously still at Liverpool. So there's an interesting angle for the goalkeepers coming through, and like Newcastle, I can see them knocking on the door of the fringe of possibly Europe. They seem to be, you know, going well in pre-season, and Eddie Howe is a very astute manager. I think, you know, we probably forget like how good a job he did at Bournemouth between bringing them up, maintaining your Premier League status and stuff like that. Like he is kept in very, very high regard. So I think Newcastle will be one that, you know, it's going to take a couple of transfer windows, but the building blocks are in place and they've got a really top class manager there. So it will be interesting view, and like the Premier League is where it's all at. Everyone's focus. It's the best league in the world, really, for my money. I think for most people around the world, it's like you look at where they're watching from everywhere. So like there's lots of stuff going on. Obviously, you'd like it to be a little bit more competitive at the top, but the battles over the last few years, it hasn't been a foregone conclusion. The battle at the bottom is as interesting as the battle at the top as well. So from top to bottom, it'll be interesting viewing the whole way through.
Yeah, Brighton point of view, obviously watching Shane Duffy will be of interest given you know, the Irish side of things. But Aaron Connolly, of course, won't be there because he's as we said, we spoke about I think a couple of weeks ago, obviously he's gone to Venezia on loan, which is an interesting move. But in the meantime, he was talking to Irish Football Fan TV's Paul Nealon, and it was a really interesting interview. You know, a couple of weeks ago we were talking about how would he adapt away from England, because it kind of felt like he needed to move away from there, and he did outline, you know, some of the issues he was dealing with. And just to pull out one quote from it, he said, "A lot of people know why I haven't kicked on, and I know myself. That's why this move to Italy was vital, just to get away from the circle. I was back in England. I need a fresh start." That sort of comment about the circle he was in England, that's sort of intriguing, Conan, I suppose, in light of what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. And anybody who actually does want to find that interview, Paul Nealon has it up on the Irish Football Fan TV social media channels and on YouTube. It's a really interesting watch. I think they've an interview with Gavin Bazunu there as well. That's worth watching. But Conan, just on you know, Connolly, and in a way we might talk about Troy Parrott too. You know, obviously he's on another loan now to Preston, higher up in the Championship compared to where he was MK Dons last season. But it's just interesting, a couple of players who publicly have talked about, you know, sort of the flick or the switch flicking, and kind of realizing it's a very short career and you need to kind of I suppose you kind of have to nail down the professional side of the game to really push yourselves on, because as we've seen from an Ireland point of view, you know, there's always rivals coming from your spot and, you know, taking your place in the squad.
Yeah, I watched the interview that Paul did with Aaron, and he kind of, it was a very mature conversation that he had, and very honest in the sense that he kind of let Middlesbrough down when he went up there. He wasn't in the right frame of mind, and to say to yourself at such a young age, to be able to, look, I need to get out of here. I need a new challenge. I need to go away. And it was kind of something that myself and Keith were talking about when we were on the podcast, Keith Tracy, a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about that he needed that little break. And it was obvious from the outside that he probably needed to get out of his comfort zone. And now is the time to see how he does get on in Italy, because it's vital that he does well. That he hits the ground running, because like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, it's Serie B. You know, it's not something that we're going to be able to watch on the TV all that regularly, and to see how his performances go.
Unless you want an expenses paid trip to like Venice every week, I can.
He offering that. He offering.
I'll see what I can
do. But yeah, just so that we'll want to hear reports of him scoring maybe 1 or 2 goals every couple of weeks, because otherwise we won't hear many many stories about him, because there's just so many Irish players now that are doing well. Ogbenny obviously getting off the mark yesterday in the championship. Troy Parrott as well. Josh Cullen on Friday night doing what he does best. So you can easily fall off and people not talk about you. So in order for that not to happen, you're going to have to start and hit the ground running and start scoring a few goals. But very mature of him to openly admit his reasoning behind the move, and you just best wishes to him.
Yeah, most definitely. So himself and Liam Kerrigan obviously in Serie B, and if we'll see what reports come back from that division. Obviously, Serie A is probably easier, obviously, to watch week to week. But
sorry, Raf, just talking about players. It'd be interesting to see how Robbie Brady does this season, because I mean, I think Stephen Kenny is still an admirer of the player. So, there's a few Irish lads there at Preston now. So, obviously the championship being probably as competitive as ever, you know what I mean? But it'd just be interesting to see, can Brady find his way back into the international setup as well?
Yeah, and Josh Cullen as well. As mentioned there by Conan, it was brilliant. Like, I watched a good bit of that Burnley game on Friday night against Huddersfield. He was brilliant in that sort of quarterback role in front of the defence, and then just sort of hanging back. But also Dara Costello was worth watching. Obviously Limerick native, would have started out Galway United, still only 19, was on the bench when Jackson was in charge of Burnley, just when they fell out of the Premier League. But now he's made his first team debut, so he's another one to watch. And just sort of what Aaron Connolly said about potentially being the forgotten man, there's always new players coming through, potentially taking place. So Burnley would be worth watching as well. Obviously Luke McNally was on the bench for them too, so we'll see how he develops after his move earlier this summer. But elsewhere, before we go, Dalymount Park, obviously there was a bit of an update in terms of the redevelopment plans over there. Obviously rising costs, as we know, with inflation and everything else. It was the original development plan was sort of running over in and around the 50 million mark. So that's been abandoned by Dublin City Council, and now there are two options. So one of them being a scaled back version of the original plan, or the other one being to refurbish the Jody stand, build a new main stand, and then add 2 terraces. And Daniel Lambert, the chief operating officer, was on Saturday Sport over the weekend, and he was outlining actually that the friendly that they did at Union Berlin earlier this summer seemed to at least spark an idea in terms of the terraces being a potential future, in terms of structure of a stadium. Terraces are something that we're looking at. And actually, just on that, Gary, in terms of what that Dalymount Park might look like with terraces, it's something that's coming back within European football. Obviously it's something taken out with the move to all-seater for safety reasons, but it does add to an atmosphere in the ground.
Yeah, I think the most important thing with terraces is that they're not too full, and I think it's far more manageable these days. I think the days of packing everyone into the stand, you see the pictures of old Dalymount and the amount of people that were there. You wouldn't think there was that many people in Dublin, but they were all in Dalymount for games back in the day. So I think there's certainly a case to be had for terraces being in football. I think a lot of people, you go to games anyway, they like standing watching football as it is. So I think the most important thing is that they can make a decision on this and move on and get the ball rolling. Like, as you said, it'd be great if they did it 20 years ago and they wouldn't be complaining about rising costs. But it's just our league and our infrastructures, they need redevelopment all over the country. Like, some clubs have done brilliant work. Like you look at Sligo Rovers, the showground, a community club down there, and it's a fantastic ground. And it serviced the needs of that club. Like, it's not full every week, but like, there would have been, probably could have sold it twice the other day. But like, our league needs, better infrastructure. I think it's the one thing that lets us down. Would have mentioned it loads of times before. You look at the top 2 teams playing in the Aviva Stadium with 50,000 people there. You look at that as a product and you say, yes, we have a product, we have an industry here. But then you take the same 2 teams and you put them into, some of the clubs would be annoyed if I mentioned the grounds, but if you put them into one of the lesser grounds, like even
not a former ground of yours,
is it? Yeah. They're all former grounds of mine. But you put them into any of them grounds and you go, oh, this is crap, because the stadium, and you look at what's around you, and it just devalues the product on the pitch, because we've got great players playing in this league, playing really good style of football, and then when you put them into the stadiums that they're in, it just doesn't look right, and it's not selling our product to and highlighting the potential that there is here. So look, whatever decision there is to be made, whether it be terraces or scaled down version, you'd like it to be made and it's a start, because we need it. We don't just need it at one club. We probably need it at 4, 5, 6 clubs.
Yeah, and the timescale, I think, from what Daniel Lambert was saying, was that they would be hopefully, or Bowes would be moving in 2027. And a final mention as well, I was chatting to Lee Desmond, I think it was back in the spring. Don't quote me on which month it was, because everything kind of blends together at this stage when you're working from home. But Lee Desmond, obviously, as was mentioned, that FAI Cup final back in November where Pats won it, he was obviously a key part of that defensively. And I was chatting to him earlier this year about going to Sacramento Republic and all the logistics and everything that came with it and the routes of the move. But himself and Dan Casey, who had moved there from Bowes the year previous, both of them are going to be playing in a cup final, and this one is the US Open Cup final, Sacramento Republic being the first, and I don't want to say non-league because that's not how it works in the United States, but the first non-MLS team to make the final since 2008. So the two of them and Sacramento Republic will be playing Orlando City, who also have an Irish player called Jake Mulroney in the squad as well. So that I think is taking place in September. So that's going to be worth watching from our point of view as well. And a final mention as well to Glenn Whelan, who I think Joey Barton at Bristol Rovers, the manager there, obviously has brought Whelan in as part of the staff. He'll still be registered as a player, but tipped as a future Ireland boss there, Conan.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see how he gets on, because like with Bristol Rovers and Joey Barton and the way they play, it would have to be a huge change in formation and dynamic to what we're used to now with Stephen Kenny. So let's just see how Stephen does first before we jump to conclusions about Glenn Whelan. But look, he's given tremendous service to the boys in green, and if the opportunity arises and he does really well in coaching at Bristol Rovers in League One, and then ultimately gets a senior job, yeah, you'll never know. But he definitely have the experience for international football anyway, considering the amount of caps that he's won.
Anyway, that brings us to an end. So Jim, thanks for
no worries.
On.
No worries.
And then Conan and Gary, was good crack today. Plenty to talk about, and obviously a lot of good games to look forward to this week.